Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Supply Chain. So, today I'm joined by a brand with customers in more than 200 countries and territories. They're trusted to help enable growth and solve their customers' most critical business problems. But who are they? Well, it's Google Cloud. Google Cloud accelerates every organization's ability to digitally transform its business and industry. They deliver enterprise grade solutions that leverage Google's cutting edge technology and tools that help developers build more sustainably. And so today I'm joined by Stephen, who is the technical program manager. And Stephen has extensive experience in logistics and transportation systems, designing and implementing solutions, and earning a CEO award along the way. Today, we're going to be talking all about Google Cloud and how its technology helps run Google's supply chain operations. We'll be diving into the trustworthiness of logistics insights and taking visibility to the next level. We're also going to be talking about the new ways operators can interact with logistics insights and the biggest untapped opportunity for logistics providers ready to embrace an AI first approach. So, welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here. I'm excited to chat about what we're doing with AI in the insight space for Google Cloud Logistics.
Me too. I'm so happy to have you here. I mean, I've wanted to work with Google for quite a while now. We've been working on this for quite a while. You've been on our listeners' wish list, and I'm so excited that we get to make that happen today. And I have so much that I want to talk to you about. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Now, you spent years at Caterpillar and Penske. Now that you're helping run Google's own internal supply chain, how are you using the one Google approach to solve the legacy pain points you faced in those past roles?
Mm. Well, that's a great question. So, in my previous roles, many of the frustrations stemmed from fragmented systems and data silos. You
Yeah.
have a warehouse management system here, a transportation management system. You got various auxiliary 1P and 3P systems, and often a lot of manual effort to stitch it all together. So, what's transformative about our approach in cloud is the ability to leverage our own GCP products like BigQuery, which is a data warehousing solution, to bring the data from all these disparate systems onto one platform in near real time. Then we layer on Google's AI and machine learning capabilities, including Gemini, to not just report on the data, but to generate real actionable insights. So instead of, spending weeks trying to consolidate data for a quarterly business review, we can get a much clearer picture in near real time and even start predicting potential constraints or, let's say, logistics anomalies. So the legacy pain points of data inaccessibility and reactive analysis are things we can tackle a lot more effectively today.
Well, and I love the fact that you're talking about not only how you use it internally for your own supply chains, but then also how you're sharing it with the industry so that they can do that as well. And one of the things that you said was the siloing, right? It
Mhm.
was like traditionally, and I cannot believe we're still talking about this in 2025. And Stephen, you've been in the industry, it looks like probably just as long as I have. And so you've seen the progression of what that's looked like through not only technology, but also the manual, the evolvement of using Excel spreadsheets and the manual work and all that kind of stuff. But still today, it's still fragmented. We're still talking about silos. How is that possible?
It's truly hard to believe, when it you're spot on that essentially silos are one of those, I would say, major barriers, and
Yes.
consolidating data is critical because logistics is simply a chain of interconnected events, right? A delay in, let's say, a compliance process impacts the warehouse, which impacts transportation, which impacts delivery to the customer. Without that centralized view, you're only seeing a piece of the puzzle. So at Google, we naturally leverage Google Cloud's capabilities to break down these silos. We ingest data from these various systems, whether it's order management, warehousing, transportation, compliance, and external carrier feeds, using tools, as I mentioned, like BigQuery, where we can store, process, and harmonize this data to create that single source of truth, allowing our AI models and our teams to have a holistic view of that order life cycle and
Mm.
that shipment journey. And it's this centralized access that means we can perform more sophisticated analysis, and that our AI tools can draw on a much richer data set. So as an example, let's say if you're going to use something like Vertex AI to build an at-risk prediction model, you'll want to know more than just a few high-level statuses from your ERP. You want a very granular look at all the shipment events and all the attributes, regardless of the source system in which those things live.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things that it comes down to is trust. I'm having this conversation all over the place because I feel like we've traditionally worked in silos
Absolutely.
because we haven't built that trust model or muscle or whatever you want to call it, either internally or necessarily externally as well. And there has to be both for all of this to work together. Now, you focus on the trustworthiness of logistics insights. And trust, like I said, is something I've been talking about more and more when it comes not only to new technology, but when it talks about like collaborating on data, sharing data, AI. Why do you think that trust is such a massive hurdle for providers who are already like drowning in data?
Yeah, absolutely. Trust is totally fundamental. Logistics managers are on the front line. They're making time sensitive decisions. If they don't trust the data or the insights from something like an AI system, they'll just revert back to, like you mentioned earlier, those spreadsheets, those manual methods. And then the value we're attempting to create is entirely lost.
Mhm.
And I would say that hurdle exists because historically data quality can be poor. You've got garbage in, garbage out, and also, oftentimes, AI implementations can feel like a bit of a black box.
Yeah.
And so, I think for my team in the insight space, we try to build trust by focusing on a few key things. Of course, the data foundation. You have to ensure that all of this sits on a good foundation of data that's clean, timely, and at least as accurate as possible. And that's a big focus for my team. This means, robust data pipelines and quality checks, but also explainability. I think that's a big, big part of trustworthiness. And this is an area where, somewhat counterintuitively, AI can help us improve our explainability. For example, let's say we flag an order as at risk, or we assign an attribute, an issue, something that says, this group is responsible for this miss or for this potential challenge. We can use Gemini to surface the key factors driving the prediction or that analysis. For example, prior to Gemini, we might need an analyst, standing by in
Right.
any number of logistics meetings. We're sitting at the back of the room to explain our metrics or our attribution. But now we can pass all those inputs, our logic and the output, to Gemini and provide users, those logistics managers, our insights along with explanations that are tailored to their particular level of sort of technical understanding directly in the context they're working in, like chat, through something like our insights bots.
Yeah. Well, and it changes the conversation. Like
Totally.
I think the world that we're going into right now that I think there is a little bit of resistance to is the fact that we're no longer not only operating the way that we have in the past, and we can't because everything is moving so quickly, changing so quickly, technology is changing so quickly. But we're also changing the way that we're actually communicating and having conversations because it's so much more about the data than it is about the gut feel, which traditionally this industry has been about. And I want to go back to sort of that data part of it before we move into everything else, because we talked about silos, we talked about the lack of trust really forming some of those silos and why we have some of those silos. I think that we also lack some visibility. Everybody talks about visibility, but I think they're talking about visibility in a variety of different ways, right? What's the visibility over my shipment? But what's the visibility over what our teams are doing? What are the tools that they need to do their job? What's the data gaps that they have? What does that look like? So, why do you think consolidating disparate data is so critical right now? And how is Google tackling the disparate data problems to achieve true centralized access, which then really builds that trust muscle?
Well, I think going to what you're saying about visibility, everybody has basic visibility now.
Yeah.
And I think that leap from, dots on a map to true actionable insights is crucial. Basic visibility tells us what is happening. Our sort of target for visibility, which you might think of as an AI powered visibility, if you will, that tells you why it's happening and
Mm,
what is likely to happen next, and even what you should do about it, right? That's that jump from descriptive to prescriptive that we're always trying to make in the insight space. We're always looking for ways to enrich the raw visibility data we ingest. So, for instance, instead of seeing a truck is delayed, we want to analyze historical data, carrier performance, traffic and weather from Google Maps, and even unstructured data like reports of port congestion to do things like drive improved accuracy for our ETAs, to assess the risk of missing a delivery deadline. In general, to move beyond these sort of static rules to models that learn patterns to provide risk scoring and highlight the contributing factors to a miss or a potential miss, and to suggest alternative actions, swapping or reprioritizing different shipments in your network. I think the trust to automate comes when the systems consistently provide reliable predictions and suggestions. So we can free up things like our logistics command centers to manage exceptions rather than be monitoring every single movement in the network.
yeah, it's so true. And that takes so much energy and effort. But you're also talking about going back to the foundation, right? Which is who, what, where, when, and how. How do we answer all of those questions quickly and have the data to be able to make the decisions that we want to make real time? Now, we talked earlier about you using Google Cloud to power Google's own global supply chain. And how cool is that? Because you are testing everything internally and making sure that it's working before you're even sharing it with anybody else. How does that internal experience help you strategize? And what concrete business outcomes has Google achieved that other organizations can then replicate by using your model?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, using our own technology to run our complex, technical infrastructure supply chain, eating our own dog food, if you will, to use an industry term, is incredibly valuable. It means we're not just the tool providers, we're also our own power users. And this experience allows us to rapidly iterate and innovate when it comes to internal tools. For example, when my team built a new Google chatbot for providing real-time insights to our logistics organization, we were able to sort of rapidly deploy this on GCP with Gemini connectivity and begin getting that real-world feedback from our operations to refine it, all in the span of just a few months. So I guess as far as concrete outcomes we've achieved that others could replicate, I think one of the big ones is just faster decision making. By providing operations with those real time insights that are accessible right in the context in which they're already working. For example, let's say you have two logistics managers discussing some ongoing challenge about getting orders out of a particular warehouse, right? They can call that insight spot right in the context of that Google chat to directly inject, some objective data about those orders into the conversation, moving away from the gut check that, you mentioned earlier. And also, I think in general, what we're all looking for is improved on time and in full delivery.
Yeah.
This is always the ultimate goal for anything we build in logistics. And so by doing things like using Gemini to surface constrained logistics processes and at-risk shipments, we've made good inroads in that space. And then I think for my team personally, so a team full of analysts and data scientists, by automating manual tasks and making data more accessible, we're getting much better improved productivity, right? And these benefits aren't just theoretical anymore. They're real results from being able to apply those GCP tools and Gemini to all our different logistics challenges.
So let's dive into a little bit of AI, right? I want to really understand what practical day-to-day logistics problems your team is currently solving with AI. If you can give us some examples of some of the challenges that you're working on, I would love to hear it. I mean, a lot of times we're hearing AI because of the hype of self-driving trucks, but there are so many other ways that we can be using it or even thinking about integrating that into what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. I mean, for my team, I would say it's less about, sort of the physical automation, although Google certainly has plenty of that, and more about decision automation and insights generation. So, some practical problems, I guess, that AI is helping us to solve daily are things like what you mentioned earlier, sifting through that data overload. Our systems handle massive volumes of data from carriers, warehouses, suppliers. With all that comes loads of different metrics and analytics, and AI can help us cut through that noise that sometimes gets generated to find those critical signals and those orders that need attention, those lanes that are underperforming, those areas of our operation that are ultimately constraining our throughput as a network. And it's also helping with, as I mentioned before, understanding delays. Instead of just knowing an order is late, AI
Right.
can allow us to analyze structured data, like all those timestamps associated with your order, as well as that wealth of unstructured data, like reason codes and comments, to come to even deeper insights about why it's late. And then that last piece is really about democratizing data access within, for us, cloud, using Gemini powered natural language processing, or really natural language data interaction. We're enabling our users to ask questions of the data without needing to know how to write some complex query, how to be a data scientist or an analyst. They can just be a logistics manager and ask their questions the way they would, person to person.
Yeah, that's kind of music, I think, to everybody's ears because I think that's part of the overwhelm that's out there around new technology is what else am I going to have to learn today? And how am I going to learn that on top of everything else that I have to do? And so it's nice to know that we don't have to learn. I mean, we kind of, to a certain extent, from a prompt engineering standpoint, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, is we do have to learn a little bit of a new language. But it's nice to hear that we don't have to go, too far in one direction to be able to use the tools.
Yeah, and some of that is on us. We have to do the work as, insights teams to enable users to ask the questions in ways that make sense to them, not just in
Right.
ways that make sense to an engineer or to an analyst, right? There's a
Uh,
lot of tuning that goes in under the hood to make those models more useful in your particular context.
Yeah, yeah, and I think everybody's going to love to hear that. Now, the other part of this is, and I mentioned it earlier, it changes the conversation. So, really, the insights that your team is currently having to be able to solve with AI is changing the conversation with a partner or a logistics provider, right? You said
Mhm.
understanding delays, asking the question, why is it delayed? Is that on us? Is that on them? Is that weather related? Understanding what is happening in each one of those scenarios just helps you to build that trust, but then also helps to build each team to really understand the right questions to be asking, and then having those conversations later on and having coming to the table with the data to say,
Mhm.
hey, this shipment was on us, but this shipment was on you. How can we change that? What can we do to make sure that that doesn't happen again on your end? We're making the changes on our end, learning from this particular shipment. What is it that you can do to learn from that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, making that data available everywhere, injecting it in all those different contexts so that we can have that objectivity be a part of all of our discussions. We like to say that things are data driven, but to really enable that,
Right.
you have to have some of the things that I was talking about, like that natural language data interaction, so that you can have AI help bring some of that data to the table. If, let's say a user just wants to search for orders or shipments using everyday language, like show me all the orders from customer X that's shipping to California that are running late. They
Mhm.
can now do that. Gemini can help translate that into the right query using the metadata my team defines. And then we can embed that insight directly into the visibility platforms we're building, directly into the context in which our logistics managers, our users are already operating.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Gemini AI for a minute
Sure.
because one of the other things that I've been talking to a lot of folks about is quality of data because you have to have that going in to be able to get the quality of solutions and answers and suggestions that are coming back from that tool. So how has integrating Gemini AI changed your tools? Like, are you just seeing faster insights? Or are they fundamentally different in quality when we think about the data and how you're interacting with each one of the tools that you're using on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the insights we're delivering are fundamentally smarter and more accessible. I was talking about earlier. It's not just about speed, but it's about the depth and having a more intuitive way to interact with the data. So outside of just the natural language data interaction, we're providing enhanced levels of analysis. So we can feed Gemini a combination of things like metrics, targets, and even unstructured, text comments from a scorecard, and it can then generate a summary highlighting key areas of concern or opportunity that might be missed on sort of that purely numerical review of performance. And this is a feature we've been able to build directly into all of our performance management tools. It's also, boosting accessibility. So with Gemini, powered Google chat apps or chat bots, if you will, we have the capability to make all of that insights data available right in the context in which our teams work today, right in their chat messages. So the insights are richer and the barrier to accessing them is much, much lower.
Well, and now I have a question because again, a lot of leaders, supply chain teams are looking at a variety of different, platforms, new technology. They can't go a few minutes without hearing the word AI. And so I want to know how this has actually changed the day-to-day work of your own teams, like your own analysts, your own developers. How has that shifted with these new AI capabilities? Like, paint us a picture. If I'm
Sure.
sitting there listening to what we're talking about and getting excited about what you're offering at Google Cloud, I also want to get a good understanding of what that would mean for myself as a leader or maybe my supply chain teams of what that would actually shift for them.
Yeah, for us, it's been a really significant shift up the value chain.
Mm.
3 years ago, a large portion of my team's time was consumed by manual data extraction, cleansing, building bespoke reports for particular leaders in response to one-off requests. Today, thanks, I would say, in large part to these AI-powered platforms in GCP and all the tools we've built out using that technology, we have less firefighting. So, automation handles much more of the routine reporting and anomaly detection. My team's able to do more strategic work.
Mm.
They can focus on more complex and impactful problems, like improving the core data models that drive all of this success, defining better metrics, fine tuning our existing algorithms. I would say there's also better skill evolution. So our analysts have to become more like data product managers.
Mhm.
So understanding business needs and shaping how AI can address them. Our development work is more on integrating AI services and building smarter applications, not just new applications, right? And then I would say in general, there's just greater impact overall. So we're spending less time on data wrangling and more time on driving real improvements in the supply chain. So I think for my team, it's more engaging and actually more fulfilling work too.
So you use the word data wrangling. I have never heard that before. I almost feel like, there's a rope and you're like
Well, I'm a
grabbing some
Southerner, right?
words out of the air. What does that mean exactly?
I'm a Southerner, I come from Texas. So when I think of, all the work we have to do or we've had to do historically to stitch all those different silos we mentioned earlier together, that's sort of what I'm thinking of when I think of data wrangling. You know, we've got two new systems that just spun up that all have a different view of the same transactions your users are trying to understand better. And
Mhm,
now we got to find out how to do all the plumbing to make that connectivity work and to build out those rich core data models
mhm.
and then to get all the valuable metadata that's so necessary today to enable these AI driven solutions on top of the core data that you've captured. So
So many
less
layers.
of the wild west of data wrangling and more of the structured, new world of data wrangling.
I love that. Now, the other part of this is you mentioned earlier that the way that logistics operators can interact with the bot is that they can ask it in a way that works for them rather than having to do classes on prompt engineering, which I love. But I also want to know if is there other ways that you are making these high-powered AI tools usable for everyday logistics operators? I'm sure it's not just the questions that they ask, but a lot of times, we do think that we have to be data scientists or prompt engineering experts to be able to interact with these. And so I would love to know a little bit more than if is it just the question or are there more ways that you're making it usable for the everyday?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is one of the more exciting areas that AI is unlocking for us. So we're moving beyond a lot of the traditional dashboards and static reports to more conversational modes of interaction. So it's not just in chat apps, although that's definitely one context in
The
which
big
it's more
one.
available. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a big one, right? But it's also in using that chat modality as a way of interacting even with existing tools. So if you imagine a tool that a year ago was covered in different filters and drop downs and parameters, and you almost had to be an expert, I won't say data scientist, but you had to be an expert user before you're getting any real value out of that application. Now, for the most part, we've blown all that away and you're back to the simplicity of, a few controls and then a natural language powered search that helps you interact with that application. And that's been a real game changer for, I think, a lot of our users, especially on the visibility side of the house. Things like a command center that now doesn't need to become an expert to interact and find exactly what they're looking for. They can find those new products that are moving across the network that have a delay, that are at risk, but only so at risk. They don't have to know exactly how to specify that because there's a lot of wiggle room, I guess, with how
Right.
you ask the question and what gets surfaced. So, not just text responses, but actually the entire response of the application is built around those types of natural language data interaction. And I personally love seeing this in the wild. Especially when you're seeing someone ask about an order, a shipment, an SOP, a report, you name it. And instead of searching around for the right document or visibility tool, they're simply adding our chat app in that context and getting the answers they need to unblock and keep moving.
Yeah, it's so magical. And I love the flexibility too. And I just want to preface this to say we do have an announcement that's going to be coming out, and we're going to be able to get Gemini in the hands of a lot of the supply chain professionals, teams, leaders, and things like that. So stay tuned because you're going to be able to even test drive some of the stuff that we're talking about today. And we're really, really excited about that. Now, at the top of the show, I talked about how you worked at Caterpillar. And I think you've got award-winning work. Like you did some award-winning work at Caterpillar. So I don't know if you can talk a tiny bit about that, but I also want to know how that's been different from you for you. The time that you were at Caterpillar and what you did on a day-to-day basis with your teams and how different it would have been if you had had the Google Cloud tools that exist today. Because I think about my journey in supply chain, and when I'm talking to folks on the podcast and they're talking about how they're changing one process or something about what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I was in logistics, and some of them I'm like, really? I wish I would have had that at the time that I was
Sure, sure.
searching ocean freight containers and manually putting in status updates. So, talk to me about what that looks like for you.
That's a fun sort of thought experiment. The work at Caterpillar involved network analytics and business intelligence, and I think with today's Google Cloud tools and AI, there'd be a lot of changes. I think better velocity of data integration, so consolidating data from all these various global systems would have been drastically faster
Mm,
using BigQuery and modern data pipeline tools. Obviously, we have a lot more analytical power now than we had back then. So the ability to apply Google's ML models and Gemini to analyze trends and predict demand would have been game changing. We could have moved, I think, faster from that descriptive to prescriptive analytics much more
mhm.
easily. Faster tool development overall. So, building interactive web applications for reporting and visibility, something that took really significant effort then, is much more streamlined with platforms like Google Apps Script and the ability to embed Gemini features so easily. And then, like we've been talking about, improved accessibility. We could have made those insights much more accessible to a much broader audience through those natural language data interactions rather than relying so heavily on specialized analysts and analysis.
Mhm.
I believe we could have achieved even more and much faster with more profound impacts on things like efficiency and cost,
Right.
the targets you perpetually have in logistics space.
I can tell because you're so excited about, what you and your team are doing today, and then you're also like, man, I wish I would have had this back then, but at least it's available to the new Caterpillar supply chain team, whatever that looks like.
Sure.
All right, last question. I hate to wind this down, but this is one of two that we're going to be doing with Google Cloud. So we're going to be talking about much, much more. So looking ahead, where is the biggest untapped opportunity for logistics providers ready to embrace an AI first approach? I almost want to say that, make sure that you don't get too overwhelmed with all the decisions that are out there and all the different opportunities that are out there as well. Like, don't just chase after that shiny object. But I'll let you answer this one.
No, no, I see several really exciting frontiers that we're just beginning to explore. So I think, hyper personalized insights is a big area for us. So AI that understands the specific role and the priorities of each user, so we can proactively deliver the most relevant information and alerts.
Hmm.
And this is something we're sort of at the early stages of incorporating today. And I would say also AI driven collaboration. Collaboration is a big word you hear a lot historically, and I think even more now in this AI context. So, systems that not only proactively flag issues, but allow you to take action on them without changing context. With a human in the loop, whether it's yourself or someone else. I was just at a fireside chat at our offices in Atlanta a few weeks ago with a company, Pluto 7, that was doing almost exactly this on the Google Cloud platform.
Okay.
And then I think another area is really logistics planning agents. So AI agents that can assist with those complex planning tasks, to simulate scenarios or provide data driven recommendations for things like network design and inventory placement, those really challenging planning tasks that are sort of the gold standard. And then I think it's the opportunity to move from AI as a tool for analysis to AI as a true partner in
Ooh.
orchestrating and optimizing logistics.
Yeah, I love that. A true partner, like thinking about not only the vendor that provides the technology as a partner, but also thinking about the technology as your partner to
Yes.
unlock the future, of what
Yes.
is possible.
Absolutely.
Well, I could keep talking to you for the rest of the day. I mean, that was fascinating. You have
Same.
you
Same
have
to you, Sarah.
so much experience in the industry. So to hear you tie the historical pain points and trust gap together with strategic value, AI in action, which I think is super important, and how Google Cloud can really bring the future to life now. I mean, that has just been a real pleasure. So, if you want to discover more about Google Cloud and how they can help you transform your supply chain operations, head over to cloud.google.com to learn more. And I want to give a massive thanks to the team at Google Cloud for making this episode happen. And remember to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Check out more content from the best and brightest over on letstalksupplychain.com. We've got the incredible guests, innovative strategies, and transformative solutions you cannot afford to miss. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Sarah. Have a good one.
All right, until next time, my name is Sarah Barnes Humphrey of Let's Talk Supply Chain.